Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm hanging out again with my friend Kat. We've been recording a bunch of Q&A episodes and taking the questions that you have asked in the chat box over the past months. Kat aggregates them and brings them into like a little interview format. You can check her work out at thecreativeintrovert.com. So thanks for being here, Kat. What do we have for today?
Yeah, thanks for letting me come on the show. So today we're going to be talking about astrology and anxiety. And part of this is prompted by an article that was sent to me from, an astrology skeptic who was kind of making the argument that astrology exists to ease our anxieties about, uncertainty of the future. So any kind of belief in fate and predestiny, this is to ease our anxiety. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's like notice how like in that tends to be a reductionist explanation. What's behind that basically is this: astrology is absurd, anxiety is not absurd. Astrology is an absurd way to address a real problem of anxiety, and if functionally it does the job, then it's understandable. Pat pat on the head, you cute little astrologers. So first of all, that's arrogant. And B, but even more than being arrogant, we have to understand where it is logically and intellectually problematic, because it's not enough to just say someone is arrogant. They can be like, well, can you blame me? You guys are foolish. Okay, so we have to be able to kind of intellectually, prick some holes in that water balloon and let it slowly start to drain out. It's a weird image. Anyway, so you know what is behind that is that first of all, it is that anxiety is a problem. Anxiety is a problem that can or should be fixed. And anxiety is a physical problem, meaning it's the manifestation of some chemicals or something that can be defined or explained in terms of like empirical, secular, or scientific rationale. And then there is the idea that astrology, which is something that is not rational or that is not empirical or that is not scientific, is trying to address it. That we don't understand how something that is like that could address something that is physical, but it does, like maybe placebo or something. And so, you know, great. People have the same arguments about religion or yoga or Christianity or having a personal relationship with God or the universe. They say, well, if it helps you deal with the uncertainty of life in the physical realm, because we're physical creatures in a chemical, space suits, then more power to you. So what we have to question is whether or not we agree with that paradigm, because that paradigm is now as dominant and orthodox and heavy-handed as, say, a religious institution can be at times. That's an irony, because as far as I understood, science is not about having truth. It's about a method of inquiring about, the nature of phenomenon. So for scientists to start saying that without any rational or empirical proof that there is not a soul, or of what consciousness is, or of where we came from, or of why we're here, scientific people, as a secular psychological types of people, will start making all of these truth claims that are ironically irrational. You can't, as far as last time I checked, someone who would say that there is no God, or there is no soul, or there is no there is no such thing as divination, or so forth. They have no proof to be able to say that there isn't such a thing. And so for them to claim that it is irrational is itself an irrational claim, because there's no existing proof that says that it's not. They don't have anything that it can explain how it is true, but they don't have any proof that can say that it isn't true. So it's for people like that to start taking this authoritative position is betraying their own faith. As the Bhagavad Gita says, and as ancient yogic texts say, everything is built on faith. Everything. You don't make one decision in life without faith that a whole bunch of different things are going to happen or will happen based on the choice that you make or the choices you have available to you, right? We have faith every day that the sun will rise because we have this sense of regularity. But there will come a day, science tells us, where the sun will burn out. So a lot of our certainty in life is based on, if I step out, I'm going to walk across the street. I have faith that my legs will carry me. I have faith that I won't get hit by a car if I choose to cross the street, or that some branch won't fall on top of my head, or whatever. So we have faith too in the kinds of certainty that we carry or don't carry. For example, people say, "Well, I don't have any truth. I don't know because I don't know. I can't know truth. I can't make a decision because I'm not capable of knowing the ultimate truth." Well, no, you don't know if you are or are not capable of knowing the absolute truth. And so you're putting your faith in the fact that you don't think you know, right? Um, so we put our faith in things, whether people think that just because that they're putting their faith in the negative, saying, well, I don't believe in that stuff, that sort of doesn't define its own faith position for them. And that's made very, very clear in the ancient yogic scriptures. So we can't escape having to make choices about the nature of self, about the nature of reality, about the nature of others, about the nature of what is real, or what isn't real. We are overwhelmed by having to make those choices all the time. So a person who is saying, oh, astrology, people are anxious, astrology just kind of deals with it, whatever. They're making a huge number of faith statements in such a formulation. For example, they're making the faith statement that the soul isn't real, that God isn't real, that astrology isn't real, that divination isn't real, and they have no proof to say that it isn't. They can also, they could make the statement that anxiety is purely a rational construct. It's based on factors happening in the environment and how they threaten your sense of survival or health or well-being or happiness. And if that's what they believe anxiety is rooted in, and only that, they're making a faith statement about the nature of anxiety. But nobody thinks that much, right? Nobody takes the time to think, well, why am I saying this? Or how are my own beliefs or my own faith statements being invested into the statements that I make? So that's the intellectual, that's the way that we sort of go at the argument intellectually, to say, look, you're not going to get on a high horse with me. There's a number of really pretty sizable assumptions and faith statements built into what you're saying here. And I think at the end of the day, that we also shouldn't claim to be experts over something we've not invested any time in. Someone says, oh, well, astrology probably makes people feel good because it relieves them of their anxiety and so forth and so on. It's like, okay, have you ever studied astrology? Have you ever spent time receiving an astrological reading or talking to people who have, or talking to practitioners? And the answer is almost 99.9% of the time, no. No, they haven't. They have an idea of what astrology is in their head with no proof, and then they're making authoritative statements about it, which again is a reflection of bias at worst, and on a deeper level, it's a kind of faith statement that they're making.
Yeah, and I feel like all you'd have to do is speak to like 10 astrologers or astrology enthusiasts and ask them, are you anxious? And it's like, most of us are. Like, anxiety is it's pretty natural for most humans to experience that from time to time. And I think it was discussed, hundreds of years ago, they figured out that reason alone isn't going to solve your anxiety, in the same way that knowing about an astrological transit certainly isn't going to solve your anxiety either, because there's other stuff, emotional responses that can't really be solved with that.
Yeah, and it also diversifies your anxiety, meaning it makes your anxiety something other than the literal anticipation of some literal event of it happening or not happening. Astrology, I think, we're talking spiritually, that the faith claim behind astrology is that anxiety is an endogenous state of existence. Like the Buddha said, that everything is made of fear. There's a way of, you can literalize that fear in terms of survival or happiness or aversion. I desire something or I don't desire it. I want it or I don't want it. It's helpful to me or it's harmful to me. But all of that is really self-centered. And astrology is also helping us to diversify what anxiety is. It's a cosmic state of being. It is tension inherent in the nature of creation. It's tension inherent in the nature of time and experience itself. And if we talk about an astrological transit from a number of different angles and possible manifestations, and then we see it come to pass, our anxiety becomes not just the literal fear of an outcome or hope for an outcome. It also becomes the anxiety that's inherent in the catharsis of a great, a great play or a great movie or a great novel. The anticipation is starts to bring us into a kind of valuable psychological participation. Anxiety isn't a bad thing. It's just, it becomes an overly literal, self-absorbed thing. And astrology helps you diversify and sort of, it makes anxiety cosmic. And when it's cosmic, then it's not only you that's dealing with it, it's all of creation. You can see it reflected in the news, you can see it reflected in your sister or whatever. And that's how it actually starts to alleviate our burdens, is by making anxiety a sacred part of life, and then a much more diverse than it is directly personal reality.
Yeah, so in that way, it definitely does help with anxiety. It's just not probably in the way that the person who wrote that thought. Um, what about the idea of astrology actually creating anxiety? So, let's say we're somebody who's been looking at our chart and our transits, and we're freaking out a bit.
Well, astrology tends to create anxiety in us when we're self-absorbed. And I'm not saying that there aren't reasons to be anxious or try to, because I get anxious and I get self-absorbed and I use astrology in more or less that way. But, and for some people, it will create more anxiety. It will. But let's compare it, for example, to an ayahuasca ceremony. So in ayahuasca ceremonies, you're drinking a very powerful plant medicine that provokes a very deep psychological, inner spiritual experience, changes lives very deeply. Oftentimes, as it does so, it increases your anxiety tremendously, right? I mean, people really freak out and can, scream, go out the top, go out the bottom, really sort of lose their shit, so to speak. But the result of having done that is often that a person this is what people, I've seen so many countless people report this, and this is my own experience as well, is you come out the other side of that and people say, what do you think about anxiety? What do you think about that, the reality of anxiety? And their answer is going to be very different than prior to drinking. And prior to drinking, they might have said, my anxiety was this or that. My anxiety was this or that. They're going to come out on the other side of a ceremony talking about the nature of anxiety, the nature of fear, the nature of those things, because by going through the experience and being exercised of the personal possessive, it's my anxiety, right? One of the things that ayahuasca does is it makes anxiety so profoundly bigger than you. So it just, in a sense, the anxiety in an ayahuasca ceremony can crush you, so that you say, there's no way that I can carry this much anxiety, right? There's no way that I can own or possess this much anxiety. There's no way I can heal it, shed it, integrate it, blah, 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 all this crap that's so self-centered. You come away saying, it's just too much. It's bigger than me. I surrender. I give up. I wave the white flag. Well, having done that, you come away and you say, on one level, you might say, I don't have as much anxiety anymore. But a little bit of reflection, people will say, I came to realize that I've been trying to hold so tightly to all of these things, and they've made me anxious, and I don't have to. I can just let them go. Anxiety just is. It's part of reality. And if I want to hold it really tightly, then it will be my problem. But eventually, trying to overcome anxiety is like trying to overcome the ocean. You're trying to overcome an archetypal nature of reality itself. Good luck. So when people do astrology for selfish reasons, right, it acts like a medicine in time. If they, oftentimes, for starters, if people get involved with it, it may amplify their anxiety to a certain extent, but that's usually only parallel to the level of self-absorption they have when they were approaching or embedded within the intention with which they approached astrology. Astrology in that sense can be dangerous psychologically, because it would be like drinking a cup of ayahuasca without the context of a ceremony or a shaman or someone there helping you to understand that the goal is to unload your possession of anxiety, your sense that it's your problem, and so on and so forth. But in time, the selfishness with which a person approaches astrology, especially through predictive astrology, will start to burn off, and they'll like the person in the ceremony. They just say, "Oh, it's too big for me. I can't hold this." What are you going to do about a Pluto transit opposing your sun or opposing your moon or something like that? The answer is very little, right? You're just going to have to live through it. And those experiences, though they may amplify a person's anxiety, if they are being guided by a sensitive astrologer in time, what they're going to do is they're going to help a person to be more deeply accepting of things, and the anxiety tends to wear off. But the big difference is whether or not a person has appropriate guidance, because if there's not someone there being like, hey, look, the point of this is to help make you more at peace with the fluctuations of karma and the way things are, and help you to distance yourself from feeling like you have to possess or control the whole thing. That if someone isn't helping you realize that that's the goal you're moving toward, if you stick with it long enough, I think it still acts like a medicine that will work in that way over time. But it's a lot more helpful if you have someone guiding you along the way.
Yeah. And what about, different people responding to anxiety in different ways? And like you said, there are these certain transits, let's say, that might, create a heightened sense of anxiety. But maybe, let's just talk about in a birth chart. Is there anything, any kind of signatures, any planetary placements that could make, I don't want to say more prone, but just handle anxiety in a more like difficult way?
Well, again, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important to have like a trusted astrologer whose mood kind of matches your own, who you feel safe with, because then, when it comes to processing transits that are more likely to create a lot of anxiety, you have someone there helping you to let go, to surrender, to accept, to find healthy choices that could alleviate the potential for this increased sense of anxiety. But anxiety wouldn't be the only thing either. It could be depression, or it could be some other thing that you're dealing with that's more or less not so fun, So the astrologer should be the one, like a counselor, who's there to help you basically say, yes, you're feeling these strong feelings right now, but here's some ways to see or process what you're going through, so that it doesn't have to, you don't have to feel like you're carrying it all and having to come up with some solution and manage it. And so I think having astrologer who can help guide you through that, even if it's just, I listen to Achyuta's channel, or I listen to this person's channel, or whatever, and the way that they have of holding the astrology helps you to not get so spun out. That's probably the number one thing, because it's really hard to do it on your own. Even me, like, because I do it all the time, but I really, I am very, very cautious now about when and why I look at astrology, because if it's coming from that place of anxiety, it tends to amplify the anxiety. So you have to be really careful of why you're approaching. And if you have anxiety and you're approaching, it's better to approach it not on your own, because then it's like looking into a mirror when you're on LSD or something. It's just like going to totally trip you out. But it's better at that moment to ask someone else to help, essentially. I don't think I answered your question. Sorry.
So the question was just about planetary placements in a birth chart, let's say, if you've seen anything that makes somebody a little bit more prone, like a moon thing, Mercury.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood the question. Oh gosh, the eighth house was a house associated with fear and anxiety about the future. It's approaching the setting place, but it hasn't yet got there. So it's associated with the eventuality of dying, of death, of setting, of consequence. So the eighth house has sometimes some good waves of anxiety that can come with eighth house transits. There's different kinds of anxiety. The 11th house people, for example, often have a lot of anxiety about future success. The 12th house people often have the anxiety that comes with not feeling seen, or being misunderstood, or not feeling safe, or not knowing one's place in the world. There's other things you could say too, but so there's like different kinds of anxieties that can exist in different places. And often it's the planet that's in that house and its dignity that will determine if that potential anxiety that's dwells within that dimension of the chart will come forth or not.
Okay, yeah, a lot of people recently, at the time of recording, have been reporting a lot of anxiety with Mercury opposite Uranus.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big one, right? The Mercury, Mercury is tends to be a little bit more chaotic. It's very fast moving. It changes positions a lot. Can reflect something of the restlessness of the mind. Uranus, of course, is definitely more of a jolter and shocker, and oftentimes the suddenness of Uranus will create little lingering, trauma responses and things like that. It can be very um, sudden and erratic. So Uranus is definitely a planet that could be associated with anxiety.
Okay. And is there anything else that you'd like to say to people who maybe are experiencing some anxiety at the moment, whether it's astrology related or otherwise?
Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the best way to process anxiety, in my opinion, is to have a spiritual practice. Because if you have a spiritual practice every single day, you're going to care. In a sense, astrology is going to become more about. It's going to feed more into your ability to kind of navigate and surf the waves of cosmic influence of the karmic energies. Um, if you don't have a spiritual practice every day that you tune into to help you get still, peaceful, quiet, that kind of fills you up, you're going to go to astrology probably more from the space of being like, okay, God, please, not another difficult transit that I have to navigate. And that's putting a lot of pressure on astrology. It's like tuning into the weatherman, and if the weatherman says it's not going to be perfectly like 75 and sunny, then you're going to get anxious. So that's a lot of pressure to put on a weatherman, the cosmos itself, you could say. So a spiritual practice along with the right use of astrology, which would be as a way of preparing you and helping you move sensitively with the change. That's the best way of dealing with anxiety with astrology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the videos that you've made around some of the more challenging transits that we've had have definitely helped me with anxiety, and I'm sure a lot of people watching will feel the same.
Yeah, I mean, you know, uh, yeah, it's really helpful, because just so that people know like what goes into the writing of my horoscopes. Like every morning when I get up, I work out, and then you got like 90 minutes to 2 hours of mantra meditation. And then I read probably 20 to 30 minutes. I read from sacred scriptures, ancient texts like the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Purana, the Upanishads, the Tao Te Ching, the I Ching. What I spend my time in sacred text. After all of that is done, only at that point, typically, will I then sit down and prepare what I'm going to talk about for the day. And when I look at the astrology, having done that first, the astrology becomes this way of seeing the divine intelligence and that's moving through all things. And I find that's the place that's the best place from which to look at and share astrology with other people, because then uh, even if there's going to be something coming that could produce anxiety, you're already in a space of seeing it. You're already looking at it from a very centered place. So that's why I would say, like, I pair everything. The way that I talk about astrology comes from pairing it with spiritual practice. And so the best way to ingest it, in my opinion, is to have something similar going on. It doesn't have to be, mine is very monk-like, and it hasn't like it's taken a very long time for it to develop to that level of kind of regularity and the amount of time I spend and so forth. And I don't think everyone needs to do that, but certainly having something every day to go. If you're ingesting astrology every day and you're not taking at least 10 minutes to meditate, I don't think you'll get as much out of it.
All right, that's all the questions I've got. Thank you.
All right, cool. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thanks, Kat, for the great Q&A questions. And if you have Q&A questions, please feel free to email them, info@nightlightastrology.com, or leave them in the chat box. Kat will gather them. We'll have some more Q&A sessions soon. Don't forget that my new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, begins November 14th. Really looking forward to this new program. If you have questions about that, we did a Q&A video called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic Q&A. It's all about my first year program. There's an early bird discount you can get, save $500 off the course. There is a payment plan, and then there's need-based tuition, especially if you're struggling due to COVID. So you can check all that out on my website as well. All right, that's what we've got for today. Make sure you also check out Kat's work at thecreativeintrovert.com. Thanks for being here, Kat.